Live from the Florida Times Union, welcome to the ActiVote 2008 debates, sponsored by the League of Women Voters, Jacksonville.com, and the Florida Times Union. Today's debate features 4th Congressional District Republican incumbent Ander Crenshaw and Democratic challenger Jay McGovern.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Scanlon, senior reporter at the Florida Times Union, and we have a live video debate online on Jacksonville.com between the two men who are running for the Congressional District 4 race in North Florida. The incumbent is Republican Ander Crenshaw. The person running against him is Democrat Jay McGovern. We have questions here that have come from you, the reader, sent in to us by email. They've been vetted by the League of Women Voters. We've got about 20-some-odd questions here to ask the two candidates. The format very similar to what you would see on a regular cable or broadcast TV debate. There'll be a 1-minute opening statement for both gentlemen. Then we will dive into the questions, and they'll get 2 minutes to answer those. So let's start right now with the opening statements, and we'll start with Mr. Crenshaw.
Well, thank you, Dan. And first, let me just say thank you to the Times Union for hosting this forum. It's a great way to get information out to the folks that are going to be voting, and certainly want to encourage everybody to make sure they go vote. But I'm running for Congress because I believe that we need to develop economic security as well as national security. And the best way to get economic security for Americans is to keep our taxes low so that you get to keep more of what you earn. You get to decide whether to spend it, whether to invest it, or whether to save it, and I think that's the best way. The other thing that I believe is important, in fact, I think it's the number one responsibility of the federal government, is to protect American lives. And the best way to keep America safe is to keep America strong. So I'm going to work hard every day to represent your views and your values, whether it's protecting our bases or bringing a veteran cemetery right here to Jacksonville. I'm going to continue to work hard for you. I'm Ander Crenshaw, and I'd appreciate your vote.
Your turn.
All right. Thank you. Well, thanks to the Times Union and the League of Women Voters for hosting and coordinating this event, and for Congressman Crenshaw for participating. Also, thank you to the citizens who submitted questions and are watching this webcast. In your attempt to become more informed voters, our country needs your participation in our government now more than ever. I'm not running for Congress to make new friends. I'm running for Congress to help fix this country. I believe that we're headed in the wrong direction, and I think you'll agree with me. I'm not asking you to like my party or me or my necktie, but I'm asking you to recognize that and acknowledge that many of us are not satisfied with the results that we're getting from Washington. The solutions to our economy, energy, and our debt are a lot closer than they appear. Today I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking in these responses that you recognize how the two of us approach and solve problems. As an engineer, I'll break these problems down, solve them piece by piece, the way we do it in North Florida. I'm Jay McGovern, and I'd appreciate your vote on November 4th. Thanks.
Okay, now we're going to dive into some of those questions. This first question, we'll start with Mr. Crenshaw. Did you vote for the Wall Street bailout bill, and can you explain why the taxpayer should be pleased with the bill? What are the long-term consequences compared to what might have happened if the bill had failed? Ander?
Well, when you say Wall Street and bailout in the same sentence, people say, well, gee, that's not a good idea. What I did was vote to help rescue average Americans. I voted in favor of this legislation because there's a credit crisis going on in our country, and it takes place where you really don't see it. But when there's no credit available, then businesses can't operate, and when businesses can't operate, then they can't hold their employees, and then people lose their jobs. And so I think I would say overall, I voted for this legislation because there was adequate protection for the taxpayers to make sure they got their money back, to make sure that no executive was going to profit at their expense, to make sure that we had accountability and oversight, which got us into the problem in the first place because we didn't have that. And I voted for it basically for 3 reasons. Number one, if I had not voted for that, I think a lot of people would have been hurt. I think a lot of Americans would have a hard time finding credit to buy the new washing machine or buy their car or maybe borrow money to send their kids to college. I voted for that because I think if I had not, other people would have been hurt. A lot of people would be afraid of getting a pink slip, about losing their jobs through no fault of their own. And then I also believe a lot of people would have watched their savings go away. People that had worked their whole life to put aside money in a 401k or maybe a pension plan or an IRA, and watch those go away. And so I'm a free market person. I didn't like to see the government intervene. But sometimes there are problems that are so severe, so acute, that it takes the federal government to step in. It's like when a hurricane comes our way. You know it's coming. You can't just stand there and do nothing. There were better ways to do this, but this was the best way we had in front of us. I supported that, and I sincerely hope that as we're on the brink of financial disaster, that it doesn't happen. And so that's why I supported that legislation.
Mr. McGovern, would you have voted for the bill? And if so, why or why not?
Okay, thank you, Dan. I would not have voted for the bill, and unlike a hurricane, this is a man-made disaster, and it's been brewing for years. You know, there's been legislation. We've been talking about regulating the derivatives market since 1998, before my opponent was a congressman. I'm not suggesting that he caused the problem. I mean, this problem has been brewing for many years, but I think Congress has sat on the sideline for the last 8 years and not done anything to help fix this. In fact, just last year, there was an opportunity for a bill to regulate the subprime mortgage industry that my opponent voted against. The bill itself was laden with pork, and unlike my opponent, I don't think it offered enough corrective action to the regulatory environment that led to the meltdown. It lacked penalties for the people who might steal from taxpayers or investors. I think we're seeing the wild ride on Wall Street is that many people's savings are going away. And I just think that we got forced in the last minute a bad deal by, it almost seemed like to the average American, like some used car salesman cramming something down our throat. And I think the American people are very skeptical of that. I don't argue that the credit crunch is real and that something needs to be done. I just wish we had anticipated a little bit more and maybe taken a more measured approach to how we solve the problem.
We've got a related question here, and I know you both have sort of touched on this. In 1999, Mr. Crenshaw, did you vote for the Casey-Stengel Act and the bill to deregulate those mortgages and things?
Well, you probably mean the Glass-Steagall Act?
Well, I'm reading, unfortunately so.
Well, you'd be interested to know that since I wasn't in Congress, I didn't vote for that.
Okay.
I doubt if my opponent voted for that either, because I don't think he was in Congress.
All right, let's go on to the next question for both of you. What drilling policy do you intend to pursue in the Florida Gulf and eastern coastal areas? If you favor drilling, what limits would you impose? If not, how do you propose to reduce our consumption of foreign oil? We'll start with Mr. McGovern.
Thank you. I think drilling needs to be part of our solution, but it needs to be an all of the above approach to a new energy policy. It needs to be comprehensive. My reticence with drilling is that for the last 30 years we haven't really pushed forward enough of the alternative technologies and opportunity for alternative technology to develop. So while I would certainly support drilling as part of a comprehensive plan, I'm disappointed that Congress has failed to raise CAFE standards in the last few years, as well as voting to continue subsidizing oil companies and less so to the alternatives. Drilling can be part of the solution, but as an engineer, I believe the alternatives are much closer than they appear. I mean, we're 30 years down the road on alternative energy technology, and we just need to move it forward.
Mr. Crenshaw.
Well, I think that drilling for oil off the coast of the country is certainly part of the solution to our energy crisis. Every day, 80 million barrels of oil are used by the world, and our country uses 20 million of those barrels. The problem is we only produce about 5 million barrels of oil a day, so we're importing so much of our oil. And I think exploration on our own, production on our own, has to be part of the solution. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, doesn't agree with that. In fact, she shut down the process. I sit on the Appropriations Committee. She wouldn't allow the committee to meet because she was afraid somebody would offer an amendment to actually allow drilling on the outer continental shelf. So for 2 months, we didn't meet. Finally, the Republicans in the House, after talking and challenging her to at least let people vote on that issue, we were going to get ready to take a vote. So clearly it has to be part of it, but it's not the silver bullet. It's not the only solution. We've got to have new sources of energy. There's new clean coal technology that's very, very important. We got nuclear power that right now we've got 5 nuclear plants in Florida, but we haven't built a new one in 35 years. That's a clean, efficient way to produce energy. Biomass is something that we do in Florida. It's a renewable energy. There's more of that in Florida than anywhere else. We've got solar power and wind power. Those are the kind of things we look for. And actually, we've got to kind of try to conserve. I drive a hybrid. That's one way. We can all take part in trying to solve this problem. But again, it's not one simple solution. But we've got to stop and think that if we're going to depend on foreign sources of oil, in so many situations, it's countries that we don't really agree with. Thank goodness we get a lot of our oil from Canada and from Mexico, but a lot of that oil comes from Iraq and Venezuela, places where those governments don't like us very much. And part of the need for more oil is to reduce our dependence on foreign oil and also to become energy independent.
Okay, the question next from our readers is for both of you. What bills, if any, will you write and urge the House to pass to help combat climate change? We'll start with the incumbent.
Well, one of the things that I think we all have to agree is that man causes climate change. That's irrefutable. Things that we do, and primarily that's CO2 emissions. We do that. And the Earth is getting warmer. That's creating a problem. The question is, what are we really going to do about it? Now, there's some people that would kind of propose some drastic solutions. In the United States Senate, they talked about what they call cap and trade, which really is a very expensive proposition. I don't think we ought to do that. What I'd like to see us do is, we've got such great research and development in this country, to sit down and spend some money doing the research, doing the development that we think is the best way to deal with this. We've got clean coal technology. I've worked on that as a member of Congress. There's a whole new generation that we can use. Less emissions, more power. But that takes time, takes energy, it takes commitment. So that's what I'm going to try to do, is not only recognize that we have this kind of global warming, but recognize that when you use renewable sources of energy, alternative sources of energy, that's one way we can deal with that. And frankly, we shouldn't just allow other countries like China. They build a new coal-fired generating plant every week. And I don't think they pay the attention that we pay to environmental standards. And so we can't outsource energy to the rest of the world. We've got to produce it here and produce it in a way that lessens the impact on our climate.
All right. Well, thank you. As Congressman Crenshaw said, man is partially responsible for this. And we spend more time arguing about proving whether man is responsible for global climate change. It really doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I can tell you, taking millions of gallons of oil out of the ground and burning it each day is not helping our environment. And although petroleum is going to be part of our solution for the foreseeable future, I think we need to move to these all-of-the-above approaches that we were talking about in the renewable or the energy question. We also can't separate global climate change, environmental issues from our economy. We need to be the world leader. As China builds these coal plants, we need to be the world leader in helping them with technology that will clean up those plants. And we have to do that here at home first. As your congressman, I would stop initially subsidizing the companies who are making products that pollute more than they contribute to our environment and our economy. I think what we need to do is refocus the way Congress approaches solving these problems. What we've done in the past is we've picked winners. We've subsidized corn to make ethanol, and instead of using the government's buying power to say, hey, we'll buy a certain amount of ethanol each year, and we'll create a market for that and allow the free market to develop the best alternatives for both energy and global climate change. Thank you.
Okay, the next reader question we've got is for both of you. Do you believe the capital gains tax should be increased? If yes, why? If not, what might be the benefits of reducing or eliminating this tax? And we'll start with Mr. Crenshaw.
Well, I'm a great fan of reducing the capital gains tax. When you lower the taxes on capital gains, you actually encourage investment. And right now, at this particular time in our economy, there's probably a very, very good reason to lower capital gains taxes to try to get this economy moving again. Studies have shown that when we do that, it frees up capital and actually more revenue comes into our coffers. So the simple answer is yes. I think capital gains taxes are something that should be reduced, particularly in the light of the economy that we find ourselves in today. We could relate those particularly to the purchase of homes. Right now, when you sell your house, you pay a capital gains tax. We could reduce that or eliminate that, certainly for a period of time. And overall, I think we'd be better off if we encourage investment, encourage people to spend their money, buy stocks, buy bonds, buy whatever, to try to promote economic activity. So yes, I'm in favor of reducing the tax on capital gains.
Mr. McGovern?
I think before you can have any conversation about taxes, what you have to recognize is American people are sick and tired of paying taxes because they don't feel like they're getting value. We need to have a spending discussion before we can have a tax discussion. Our national debt is spiraling out of control. I agree that raising a capital gains tax is not going to necessarily raise revenue, and it's certainly not going to encourage investment. So, a lot of people would like to see a simplistic approach to this and say if we raise the capital gains tax, we're going to increase our revenue, and it's simply not the case. It's more complicated than that. First of all, a lot of the people that would otherwise pay that increased capital gains tax would just choose to hold on to that investment longer, or they'll channel their investment money into other types of investments that they won't have to pay a capital gains tax. So it's not a simplistic approach. You can't just raise the rate and increase revenue. It's much more complicated than that. But whether you're talking about capital gains tax or income tax or anything, I think it's a matter of value. People don't feel like they're getting value for their tax dollar. And so we need to have a spending discussion first.
Okay. The next question is directed initially at Mr. McGovern. Barack Obama has come out with a very extensive health care package designed to ensure all Americans have adequate health care, presumably at a reasonable cost to families. This person would like to know if we would have enough doctors, equipment, staff, medical facilities, etc., to handle everyone that would be covered. What guarantees can we expect to protect the program from fraud, waste, and abuse when considering all the additional people who will be covered? And, of course, the bottom line, do you support that plan?
That's a great question, and healthcare obviously is a huge issue in this country. It's important for people in North Florida to understand that I don't agree with everything Senator Obama or Senator McCain advocates, and I would say that we definitely need to increase access and reduce costs to health care. I look at it as an engineer as one of those problems. It's huge, and we need to break it down into its component problems. Component parts, excuse me. One of the things that we need to recognize is that we pay right now in America twice as much as other industrialized countries for medical. So just intuitively, we know that we can lower the cost without changing the quality of care. And then the question then becomes access. We need to increase access. For example, 1 in 5 children in Florida don't have health insurance. And as one of those sub-elements of fixing health care in America, I would provide health care to children first. First of all, they're inherently healthy. It's not a cost as much as an investment. The sooner that we can break the chain of their chronic illnesses, the sooner we'll lower Medicaid and Medicare costs in the out years. So that's what I mean by taking this problem into its component parts. The number of doctors, nurses, that's also part of the problem. We need to invest in education. Our economic policies have really been focused around lowering tax brackets, but education is a huge part of building a strong economy. And I really think that healthcare is a classic area where our country can really benefit from research and education. We can eliminate chronic diseases and lower our health care costs.
Mr. Crenshaw, related to that, the reader questions, can you explain the kind of plan you support to improve the health care system in this country?
Certainly, I think first and foremost, the Senator Obama's plan really approaches what I consider to be socialized medicine, and I think that's wrong. I think we need to deal with healthcare and make it a market-driven approach. We've got the best healthcare system in the world. There's no question about that. We've got the best doctors. We've got the best hospitals. We've got the best research and development, and we ought to build on that. And one of the ways we can do is to make it more affordable, make it more accessible. We all agree the quality is there. How do you make it more accessible? I think one of the ways we can do that is, and we've proposed this, having a little trouble getting it through the Congress, but allow companies, what we call associated healthcare plans, have smaller companies come together so that they can increase their buying power and they can offer health insurance to their employees at less expensive cost. That's one of the things we can do. There's something called health savings accounts, HSAs. It's a great idea. It allows people to put money in a tax-free account, let it build tax-free, and let them decide what kind of health care they want to buy. We don't have to have a one-size-fits-all. If somebody decides they want to buy a minimum coverage, they can do that when they're young. If they're older, they might need more. But that's another thing we can do. We could also give people a tax credit when they buy health insurance. Let them save a little bit of money on their taxes when they do that. But again, it's all about making it affordable, all about making it accessible, but maintain the quality that we have. That's the way we deal with health care.
Okay, the next question from readers is for both of you. What do you intend to do about illegal immigration and the illegal aliens who are here now? Do you favor a comprehensive plan to deal with this issue? And we'll start with Mr. McGovern.
Thank you. Yeah, it's important to understand that these people wouldn't be coming in our country illegally if they weren't finding jobs. Now, I certainly don't support anybody that's breaking our laws, but I think our immigration reform needs to be focused on both aspects, the people who are coming here illegally and the people who are employing them. And I think that we can focus on increasing penalties for those people who are employing illegal workers as part of immigration reform. You know, one of the things that I would say is that we have more than a choice between the status quo and a guest workers program. You know, we have an immigration system that's been the bedrock of the growth of our country for 200 years. We need to go back to that and have an opportunity for people to come here in a permanent status. You know, permanent jobs and permanent resident status. We also should have increased opportunity for people to come here for permanent jobs on a temporary basis. Now, we have an immigration system problem as much as we have an immigration problem.
Mr. Crenshaw?
Well, I think we all agree that immigration is good. Legal immigration. Basically, our country is made up of people that have come here from other countries. It's the great melting pot. But the problem is when people come here illegally. That's just plain wrong. We've got a lot of people that are here illegally, and unfortunately we've got 500,000 or 600,000 people that come here every year illegally. And I know in my office we help a lot of people. In fact, I was looking at a record, and over the time that I've been in Congress, we've helped over 4,600 individuals with problems they have, whether it's immigration, whether it's the IRS, whether it's veterans. But a lot of people are waiting in line to become citizens. Why? Because they love America. They know it's a great place of opportunity, and they want to come here. And it just is flat out wrong when somebody can break into the line and come here illegally. And so what we've tried to do is to spend a little bit of money to enforce our immigration laws. We've added new police officers at the borders to try to stop the people that come here. Because frankly, it's not just a question of people coming here illegally. That's bad enough, but it's also a problem of national security. If we've got people that can come across our borders without anybody stopping them, what's to stop them from being the kind of terrorists that we're trying to prevent from coming into our country? So I think it has to be enforcement first. We've got to stop the illegal immigration that comes here, and then we'll figure out what to deal with the people that are here. But until we can stop the flow of illegal immigration, we should do no more. It's got to be a security interest. It's got to be more police on the border, It's got to be more detention facilities. We've got to stop this somehow.
Next question, do you believe we have to stay in Iraq until there's a victory? If so, what is your definition of victory? We'll start with Mr. Crenshaw.
Well, I think Iraq has been one of the most difficult issues facing our country. I happen to believe, as I said earlier, that the number one responsibility of our federal government is to protect American lives. And the way you do that, you keep America strong. That's the way you keep America safe. And we're in Iraq now. I visited the troops there. I was one of the first members of Congress to go right after the fighting stopped. And I saw firsthand the thankfulness of the Iraqi people to say that you've come here, you freed us from being under this ruthless dictator. I was back again a couple of years later when they had their first election. And if you remember, the people dipped their finger in purple and walked out and so proud that they'd taken part in a democratic election. And so things are improved. When General Petraeus went there to turn things around, as you may know, we're in the process of signing an agreement that will say that all of the troops will be out by 2011. They're actually going to start drawing them down now. Part of that agreement talks about who's going to be in charge, and our basic philosophy has been as the Iraqis can stand up on their own, then our military will stand down. And everyone admits that the surge is working. This is not the classic victory, but there's certainly a case where a country that was run by a ruthless dictator has been now put in the hands of its own people. They're developing their own system of government, their own economy. Things are going well, and as long as that takes place, we should help them, but we shouldn't have any artificial timeline like a lot of the liberals in Congress have proposed over the years to try to admit defeat. Things are going better. They will continue to go better, and when that document is signed, I think you'll see more and more American troops come home.
Mr. McGovern?
I think our troops already won the war. I think there's already been a victory. They won that war 4 years ago. We've had a preoccupation with Iraq that has caused us to want to spread democracy around the world and lose focus on what America does best, and that is to promote prosperity around the world. I appreciate the people, members of Congress, that come over to visit the troops in Iraq. I've been one of those troops in Iraq. I spent 2 years of my life since 9/11 in the Middle East. And I agree that our troops are doing a magnificent job, and like Congressman Crenshaw, I couldn't be more proud of my brothers and sisters in uniform. Spending as much time as we've spent over there, we cannot argue that it's strained our military and indeed our economy. We need to remove our troops from the war that they already won 4 years ago. We need to do that carefully. The timeline is not a policy. The timeline is a planning tool, and it needs to be part of it. It's not the solution. There's been a lot of talk about the surge working or the surge not working. The surge was a resource decision. We decided to send more troops to Iraq. The success in the reduction in violence in Iraq is in part due to the number of troops we had in the country. But it's more than that. We changed our tactics. We became much more aggressive in rooting out the opposition. And there was also a Sunni awakening. General Petraeus and our troops have done a fantastic job. The Iraqis are ready to step up to the plate, and we need to let them. We need to let go, bring our troops home, stop spending the $10 billion a month there, and rebuild our prosperity at home.
Change of pace in the next question. Do you believe in term limits for all elected officials, including members of Congress? Why or why not? And we'll start with Mr. McGovern.
I don't really agree with term limits for all offices. I was one of those people in the late 80s and early 90s that certainly enjoyed the thought that term limits would help solve our problem with career politicians. And I think that they just haven't worked out the way that we intended to. What we see is people going from city council to state legislator, eventually to Congress. We're just seeing that people are changing seats. They're not returning to their life and getting new skill sets, new experiences from which to go solve problems. I'm not a career politician. I've never run for office before. I think that that's going to help me bring a different perspective to solving problems in Congress. It's almost as if term limits have done the opposite of what we intended them to do. They've really given the parties more power than the citizens had ever intended them. Our city council and state legislatures have become much more partisan than they ever were. And if you don't toe the party line, you don't get the party nod to secure your next victory in next office. So I don't support term limits in all cases.
Mr. Crenshaw.
Well, I've never taken a term limit pledge, and I don't really think term limits do what they are supposed to do. I think we've got the ultimate term limit plan, and that's called an election. Members of Congress run for re-election every 2 years. John Quincy Adams, who was President of the United States, after he was president, he ran for Congress. In fact, he served 18 years in the United States Congress. He called it the People's House because every 2 years he went out and he talked to the people. And so I think you've got that kind of term limit that really exists. Every 2 years, every member of Congress goes out, makes his case to the American people, asks for their vote, tells them why he ought not to be reelected. So I think that's adequate protection.
Okay. The next question, will you support expanded Amtrak passenger rail service in the United States, both in the form of long-distance intercity rails, operating overnight with full service, sleeping as well as coach, and checked baggage? Specifically, will you use the weight of your office, this is from a reader, to get the Sunset Limited returned to Florida? And we'll start with Mr. Crenshaw.
Actually, I've been working to get the Sunset Limited returned to Florida. I'm one of the believers in Amtrak. A lot of people criticize Amtrak because it takes a little bit of federal government to keep it going. But when you stop and think about it, all forms of transportation require some sort of federal involvement. You've got airports that are federally funded to a certain extent. We've got an interstate highway, which is federally funded to a certain extent. So you've got trucks, you've got planes, and now you have rail. And I think Amtrak could do a better job. In fact, when we reauthorized Amtrak this year, we put in some safeguards to try to encourage Amtrak to do a little bit better job of being more efficient. One of the problems is you'll find that when the government gets involved, it's not always as efficient as it should be. But recognizing that that's a very important kind of travel, both from a rail standpoint and a passenger standpoint, we ought to do what we can to promote it, but we ought to do what we can, and we did it this year, to make sure they're a little more efficient in the way they run that railroad. And if we had back going over toward New Orleans, it would add some passenger traffic. I might do a better job. Only up in the Northeast do they really do a good job. I guess it's because there's a lot of travel up there. But I can still remember taking the train to Washington, D.C. when I was a patrol boy. And frankly, when I went back a few years later, it hadn't changed a whole lot. So we can do a little bit better the way we run that. But certainly I think it's important to have that kind of passenger traffic.
Mr. McGovern?
Thank you. Well, you can't talk about transportation, Amtrak, without talking about how important it is to our economy. And when we talk about finding solutions to our energy needs, mass transit is going to be part of that. I mean, we need to encourage more passenger travel by Amtrak. We need to help CSX. We need to increase ridership on our buses. There's a lot of things that we need to do to help ease the demand for oil and help solve our problems. This district is very diverse. I mean, in Duval County, it's a lot easier to hop on a train and go somewhere. Other parts of the district, you can't do that so much. If you're a construction worker in Lake City, you're not going to just get some 4x8 sheets of plywood and hop on the bus and go to your job site. Some of our Americans are going to have to continue using private transportation, but those of us who can use mass transit, we need to do that, and the federal government needs to encourage more of that.
Next question, what is your stand on Roe v. Wade? And we'll start with you, Mr. McGovern.
I don't know anybody that's pro-abortion, and I think that abortions are a tragedy. But I think we can't confuse Roe v. Wade with ending abortions. Before Roe v. Wade facilitated legal abortions in this country, we had illegal abortions that were taking place that threatened mother and child. If it were overturned, I think we would have that as well. What we need to do as a nation is come together, and we need to do it as a nation, not as a government. But we need to come together and make sure a woman feels that that's not her best option. It is her choice, and we need to help make the choice better for everyone.
Mr. Crenshaw?
Well, I happen to think that Roe v. Wade was a wrong-headed decision. I think that decisions like that are best left to the state. I don't find any thing in the United States Constitution that gave the Supreme Court the right to basically legalize abortion in the Roe v. Wade decision. I guess I would say that my career in politics has been very much part of the pro-life movement. I think every individual from the moment of conception has a right to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Roe v. Wade, I think, was wrong-headed from a theological standpoint, from a medical standpoint. It's hard for the Supreme Court to decide those kind of decisions that relate to human life. So I've just been that way my entire life. I think that the right to life is fundamental to everyone, and the Roe v. Wade decision was wrong.
Next reader question is, some feel Social Security is going the way of the financial industry. What would you do to reform Social Security? Mr. Crenshaw.
Well, that reader's exactly right. If things keep going like they're going now, in about 30 years, Social Security will be paying out more than it's taken in, and you'll be getting about 78 cents on the dollar in 2040. So we got to do something. And you know, I'm one of those people that is retiring. I mean, it is nearing retirement age, and I don't want to change anything that relates to me. But I've got a couple of daughters that are in their late 20s, and I'm afraid that when they get ready to retire, if we don't change something, there's not going to be any money in the system for them. And one of the things that I've supported and pushed for is simply allowing people, if they so choose, to take some of the money they put in to the Social Security and set it aside in a retirement account. They can do that voluntarily. I don't think it ought to be mandated. People like me that are older would say, I'll live with the system, I've paid into the system, my money hasn't made much of a return at all, but I think it'll be there when I begin to draw my benefits. But if you're a young person today, it seems to me it would make sense if you look at the facts. When you put money in Social Security, it doesn't earn any interest. It just sits there. It goes in, it goes out. And if I were a young person today, I would like the opportunity to say, I might take a portion of that and set it aside and invest it however I might choose. Maybe it's a very, very secure investment that buys a bond or buys a certificate of deposit. It's hard to imagine you could do any worse than just put your money in the Social Security and watch it run out in 30 years. So I think that's one of the ways. That's not privatization. That's simply allowing people to control their own destiny and let them have that choice if they choose, and they could probably do better on their own.
Your response?
Well, my first thing is I hope Congressman Crenshaw is nearing retirement. Just kidding.
Okay.
Just kidding.
No, I thought that was going to be an announcement. No, but you know, the first thought I have about Social Security is, you know, we have known that this problem has been brewing, and we haven't done anything about it in Congress. Everywhere I go, people either retired or nearing retirement ask me about Social Security. I don't think privatizing Social Security is the way to go. We've had a pretty rocky last couple of weeks on Wall Street. If we had done that 6 years ago, there would be some people that would be in serious trouble today. But I think we need to not just look at Social Security as retirement. I think we need to look at it more holistically, combining Social Security, not literally combining it, but looking at it, Social Security, health care, energy costs, housing costs, life insurance. Retirement is a lot more than just Social Security. Fixing it is really just a time value of money. The sooner we start fixing it, the sooner it will be fixed. I agree with Congressman Crenshaw. If you're nearing retirement age, we would not want to mess with anybody's benefits there. But looking at our children, we can definitely improve this system.
Okay, the next reader question: congressional approval ratings are the lowest in history. Why do you think that's so? We'll start with Mr. Crenshaw.
Well, it's interesting that the approval rating for Congress today is about 10%. That's the lowest it's ever been since they ever been keeping track of what it is. And wouldn't you think the Democrats are controlled? There's a lady named Nancy Pelosi from San Francisco. There's a guy named Harry Reid from Nevada. They run the Congress. And you would think if you've got the most disliked Congress since you've been taking the temperature of Congress, wouldn't you think that that kind of impacts the Democrats a little bit worse than the Republicans? They've driven this to a new low. And I think part of that reason is these last 2 years, I've been reading, and it's kind of fairly objective, that it's been probably the most, I guess, do-nothing Congress. The last year, under the Democratic leadership, Nancy Pelosi about once a week would bring out a resolution trying to set a timeline for Iraq or try to embarrass the president about Iraq over and over and over again. So not much got done last year. But that didn't work because actually when General Petraeus went over there, the surge began to work. People were still troubled by Iraq, but they saw positive things coming out. So this year, everything got slowed down because of the energy issue. Republicans in the House said, we want an all of the above solution. We wanted our own exploration. We want our own production. We want alternative sources. And as I said earlier, the Appropriations Committee just shut down. She decided that we're not going to have any more appropriations meetings. In fact, it's the first time I can remember that the 13 appropriations bills that are supposed to come out, only 2 came out. One, thank goodness, was military construction and Veterans Affairs. That's my subcommittee. We worked hard to get that done, but nothing else happened. So I don't blame people for looking at what goes on in Congress and say something's wrong. But unfortunately, a lot of people still think Republicans are in charge of Congress, but that's flat out not the case.
Jay?
Thank you. You know, with all the problems that we face in this country, now is not the time to play partisan politics. The people in North Florida didn't hire Nancy Pelosi or Harry Reid. They hired Ander Crenshaw to go solve these problems. And whether you pick one of them, just pick one of them, we didn't fix it. Healthcare, the energy, our debt, we didn't fix one. We deserve better than that. The American people deserve somebody that's going to work as hard as they do every day to go fix the problems. Whether it's you disagree with your opposing party's bill, you got to offer something that's an alternative. You can't just shoot it down. Both parties have been doing that up in Washington, and it's not serving the American people. It's not serving us well at all. I'd just as soon live my whole life and not be a congressman, but I can't sit on my farm and just hope that things are going to get better. I needed to step up to the plate, and I needed to run for Congress because of that 10% approval rating. Thank you.
Okay, the next reader question: what will it take to totally eliminate all earmarks, and what will you do to make that a reality? Mr. McGovern.
The earmarks, although they've been really increasing in the number of earmarks, I remember in 7th grade civics we used to talk about pork projects. They've been a part of this government that we have since the beginning. Eliminating them is not necessarily the answer, but they just can't be the first resort to get your bill passed. You know, with this bailout bill, it didn't pass until they loaded it up with a bunch of pork, and then it passed Congress. That's just disgusting, and it's not serving the American people well. And I don't care whether it's Democrats or Republicans. It doesn't serve well. Congressman Crenshaw has brought good things to our community that some would call earmarks, and because he sponsored them. All earmarks are not bad, and he has brought some good things to our community, and I applaud him for that. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we've got to get this under control, and you know, we can't use it as the path of least resistance to get a bill passed through Congress.
Mr. Crenshaw.
Well, also, just what Jay said a minute ago, he said he'd rather live his whole life and never serve in Congress, and I just want him to know that I agree with him on that. That's something we do agree on. But about earmarks, let me just say that, this is one of those things that people say, well, why didn't you change everything? I've been trying to change the way earmarks take place. Earmarks are basically members of Congress having a decision into how we spend our money. If there weren't earmarks, then the president would submit a budget and it would be adopted. These unmanned aerial vehicles, the so-called drones, that was a result of an earmark. But what we can do is make the earmark process more open, more transparent. In fact, I'm part of some legislation that says we will suspend all earmarks until we come up with the kind of reforms that we need. What's wrong is that when something doesn't go through a committee and it just appears overnight in a conference report, we call that airdropping. That's wrong. But when I do things for my community, whether it's building a new facility at Mayport or NAS Jax, whether it's helping deal with a crime problem by bringing money to the PACE Center for Girls or the Youth Crisis Center, all that goes through a very, very serious review. People look at that. People know about it. They know that I would like to see that happen, and there's no surprises. And if it meets all those criteria, it becomes part of an appropriations bill. But what's absolutely wrong is that when something doesn't go through the Senate, it doesn't go through the House, it doesn't go through the committees, it doesn't go through committees in the Senate, but all of a sudden, one night, it appears in the dark of night. That's wrong. That's where the bridge to nowhere came from, and that's absolutely wrong.
Next reader question we've got here is: the availability of potable water resources is as critical to our state as oil is to our nation. The same is true between states out west and in many parts of the world. What should the role of the federal government be, if any, in developing new technologies to provide potable water where needed in the U.S. and in other parts of the world? Mr. Crenshaw?
Well, I think the water issue is going to be one of those issues for the next decade. In fact, frankly, it's been around for a long time. We've fought these water wars in Florida and California because in some areas there's more water. We're lucky in North Florida. We've got the Green Swamp. We've got the St. Johns River. We've got a lot of water. You go to St. Petersburg and you don't find a whole lot of water. You go to North California, you find a lot of water. You go to Southern California, there's not much. And so there's always these squabbles. But the one thing the federal government can do, and I think it in a broader sense, we've got the Clean Water Act that sets up minimum guidelines. Those are the things that I think the federal government ought to do, but I think the states should be left to deal with the problems. Right now in our community, we're doing a great job of dealing with the St. Johns River. There's an effort underway by the cities that are all along the borders of the river. It's been $600 million. Businesses are involved, communities are involved, the local governments are involved, and they'll set the standards that are ultimately set by the federal government. But they'll use those standards to figure out the best way to bring water to the communities that need the water.
Okay.
I think you couldn't have asked a better question to connect our environment, our economy, jobs, and what things that are so precious to particularly North Florida's economy, whether you're talking about the St. Johns River, the Itchin-Techney Basin in this district. Just huge, huge issue. And what the federal government can do is kind of change the way it thinks. When we designate the St. Johns River a heritage river, we need to put the money behind it, what that means. Or we not designate it at all and say it's not important to us. But of course it is. What we need to do, the federal government needs to look at water resources holistically. We have a great battle in front of us right now with whether or not to take millions of gallons of water out of the St. Johns River. We can look at Northern California, we can look at Atlanta, and we can learn from those mistakes. The federal government can help in developing and facilitating gray water projects. It can help in facilitating that Florida change its economy to an energy economy, not a growth economy, where we're getting millions of more people moving here and consuming our water. We can look at the long-term projects for water, reverse osmosis, desalinization, all kinds of things. We really need to facilitate the long-term solutions.
Next question. I would like to see a balanced budget and the deficit paid off. I know this will take time, but it can be done. In order to do that, we need people in Washington who know how to handle money. My question is, other than your mortgage, how much debt do you have in the way of car payments, credit cards, personal loans? This is important, says this reader, to know, because if you can't control the spending of your own money, I can't very well expect you to handle the money when it's mine. We'll start with the incumbent.
Well, that's probably a good question. Let me think. I do have a mortgage on my house. The listener or the questioner would be happy to know. I own my hybrid car outright. I own my 1996 car outright. It's not worth a whole lot of money, but I don't owe any money on it. I don't think I have any other debts. I'd have to go check my checking account, but I don't think I have any other debt, and so that's about it. But I do think the federal government could do a better job of controlling its spending. This year the deficit's going to be about $460 billion, and that's a little more than it is historically. Usually it's about 2.5% of the gross domestic product. We've got a $14 trillion economy. And one of the things I can say that I'm proud of, I was on the budget committee in the Congress and worked to give a line item veto to the president. That didn't pass. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle think that gives the president too much power. I think there ought to be a balanced budget amendment. We have that in Florida. I was president of the Florida Senate. When we wrote a budget for the first time in 20 years, we didn't raise taxes. People just thought that was out of the question, but we did it without raising taxes. So I think that we ought to do a better job of controlling spending. And I would say the last time the Republicans were in charge, again, not to be partisan, but I was on the budget committee, and we wrote a budget that if you take out Homeland Security and National Defense, in other words, all the non-defense spending was frozen at the year before, and I thought that was a step in the right direction. That's kind of gone away now, and we're spending more than we take in.
Your turn.
Quick, I have a reasonable mortgage on my house. My cars are paid for. I have no car loans. I do have credit card debt, not substantial. But I agree with the reader. You know, it says a lot about how we manage our money. 8 years ago, Congressman Crenshaw inherited from the Democrats a balanced budget. In 8 years in Congress, there's been a deficit every single year and increasing. It's interesting to sit there and say, well, if you take out the war, you take out this, but I can't take that out at home. I can't tell my wife, I balanced the checkbook, but I didn't pay the mortgage. You know, you got to include everything. And so that's the tough part that Congress faces. As I go around this community in the district and talk at candidate forums to sheriff candidates and city council and county council candidates, the local and the state budgets are balanced, and they're making tough calls. And we need Congress to do the same thing. Our national debt has gone from $5.7 trillion to $10.3 trillion in the last 7.5 years. It's just got to stop.
Well, we spent the past hour listening to the two candidates for the Congressional District 4 race. You can listen on Wednesday, October 22nd, to a debate with two school board candidates, Stan Jordan and Ken Manuel, right here on Jacksonville.com. I'm Dan Scanlon. Have a very good day.